Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Friday, April the 18th, 2025. So today's Good Friday, isn't it? I think. But of course, I'm in America, so they don't seem to take Good Friday very seriously. But I remember being in Europe, particularly the UK, Good Friday was a holiday. And so it kind of seems weird from a European perspective for Friday to just be a normal day. Now, as far as what's happening today is concerned, the big event is Mars moving into Leo. And so Mars had been retrograde, moving through Cancer, and it did actually go into Leo at the end of last year around the time of the presidential election, and then it went retrograde into Cancer, and now it's back in Leo, and that is a big event, and that's something I want to talk about in this video. I also want to briefly discuss this UK Supreme Court ruling that essentially the definition of women is biological, and I briefly mentioned it in yesterday's video, but I want to just look at it again, look at what I think is a chart for when that ruling began, to see if we can tell anything. So that's something I want to cover very, very briefly. But first of all, let's look at the astrology and the I Ching for today. By the way, if you happen to like this video, I'd be very grateful if you would really indicate that you liked it. And if you're not subscribed, I would be happy to have you as a subscriber. So here is the chart for today, set for noon New York time. And so what we see is that the moon is now in Capricorn, and so we've got this changeover. Moon has moving from Sagittarius to Capricorn. In fact, this movement takes place at 12 minutes past 3 London time. So that's 12 minutes past 3 in the afternoon. So if you're in the Americas, then over the course of the morning, the moon will move into Capricorn. And so that is a change of emphasis, and the moon is moving into an earth sign, and this is a reminder that we've had this dearth of earth recently, and we've been relying on the moon to give us our earthiness. This situation is not going to last long because the sun is on the verge of moving into Taurus, and so we're going to start seeing a lot more earth around over the next few months. So moon in Capricorn, well, people are going to maybe be a little more selfish than usual, more attentive to material details, wanting to make sure that the ground under their feet is secure. So that might be one manifestation of the moon moving into Capricorn. We also have to think about some of the aspects the moon makes before it moves into Capricorn. So the moon will make a square to Saturn, and it will make a square to Venus as well. And so that could represent a little bit of a hold-up, moon square Saturn. If you're in the Americas, I don't think you're going to feel that so much, but if you're in Europe, Africa, Australasia, then it could well be that at some level the moon square Saturn says a lot about what the day is like. There may be a feeling that things aren't moving, though the moon does also make a trine to the sun. So the sun is at 28 Aries. So as the moon gets ready to change signs, to move from Sagittarius to Capricorn, it does make this trine to the sun, and this trine to the sun I would regard as being, really quite pleasant. It's an easygoing trine in fire signs. It's got a bit of excitement to it, and it's very healthy and life-giving. And so maybe we can take advantage of this trine. I don't see anything bad about it. And, then Moon moves into Capricorn, and it will make a square to Neptune and a square to Mercury. So there's a bit of a contradiction there, because you think Moon in Capricorn, oh, that's very sensible, very down to earth. But then Moon in Capricorn square Neptune in Aries, well, we'd like things to be down to earth, and things can be down to earth, but we need to be aware that nothing is entirely straightforward. And with that Moon square Neptune, we must not just take things at face value. Some things are a little bit complicated, and they do need some thought. And we mustn't forget the human dimension. Even when the moon is even when the moon is in Capricorn, people can behave in a somewhat unusual way, and they can give off confusing signals. And then there is a main event of the day, which is Mars moving into Leo, and this is it is a big event. And as far as when it moves into Leo, London time at 5:21 in the morning. So if you're in Europe, Africa, Moon is in Leo pretty much all day. If you're in New York or California or the Americas, in fact, then very early in the morning or even late last night, the Moon will move into Leo. So will have moved into Leo. So the only issue might be if you're in Australia or New Zealand. In that case, the Moon is not going to move into Leo until quite late in the day, and likewise if you're in East Asia. So there is a bit of variety there, but I think that most people watching this will basically experience Mars and Leo, for all of Friday. And yeah, sure, it's a change. Mars moving out of a water sign and into a fire sign. Traditionally, Mars is not wonderfully placed in Cancer. It's fallen in Cancer, although Mars does move a watery triplicity. So because of Mars's ruling of the water signs, it does have a certain amount of dignity in Cancer. Then it moves into Leo. Mars in itself does not necessarily have any dignity there. It doesn't have a great deal of dignity in this sign. It can kind of depends what part of the sign Mars is in. But on Friday, today, Mars is moving into Leo at a time when the Sun is in Aries. So that means that Mars is in a sign ruled by the Sun, and the Sun is in a sign ruled by Mars. So the Sun and Mars are a mutual reception. But this mutual reception is not going to last very long, because the moment the Sun goes into Taurus, the mutual reception is over. So as far as when the Sun moves into Taurus, the Sun moves into Taurus, I think it's on Sunday, Saturday. So on Saturday, could be on Sunday if you're in Australia or New Zealand, but sort of Saturday it moves into Taurus. So you could say that you have to really get going if you want to take advantage of that mutual reception. So if there's something important you want to do that is of a dynamic nature, you need to do it on Friday or Saturday. You need to do it while Mars is in Leo and Sun is in Aries. So it's actually quite a brief sort of window of opportunity where Mars is hyper strong. Now, I don't want to sort of panic you if you miss that opportunity or it's just not appropriate. Don't worry about it. I just thought I would point out that there is a window, where Mars is extremely strong. And if you want to do something really that requires dynamism and power and conviction, now might be the time to get going on it. And apart from that, I would have said that's a broad picture for today. Let's just quickly look at Sydney, Australia. So if we set the chart for noon Sydney, as a representative of Australia and New Zealand, then the moon is, earlier in Sagittarius. It's at moon at 23:47 Sagittarius. So that tells us that in Australia and New Zealand, for most of the day, this sign is where the moon will be in, and it won't move into Capricorn until very late in the evening, or even into tomorrow. So a slight difference there. Also, look at Mars. Mars is not quite in Leo, so it won't be until the afternoon. I think in Australia or New Zealand that Mars makes the sign change. So that does indicate some differences, and it might indicate some timing differences. Remember, I was saying that Sun mutual reception Mars could be really fortunate, a good time to take action. So if you are in Australia or New Zealand, you've got something important to do, then maybe late on Friday, once Mars has moved into Leo, or perhaps if you have the opportunity into Saturday. And then there is the heliocentric view. So these are the positions of the planets. If you put the Sun at the center of the solar system, where it should be, the Earth is still trine Jupiter. So there's the Earth at 2852 Libra, and it's trine Jupiter. The trine is separating, but I think we can still take advantage of it. I think the Earth trine Jupiter is a fortunate aspect. It allows things to move, and it's kind of happening at the same time as Mars is moving into Leo, as Mars moves into mutual reception with the Sun. So there's further evidence that it's quite an action-orientated day, or at least it can be, because if you're really prepared to sort of get things together. And I think that's about it. I don't think there's a great deal else going on. The Earth, having made that trine to Jupiter, is starting to make a quincunx to Neptune. So as you move into the weekend, then that Earth quincunx Neptune may indicate a little bit of uncertainty. People aren't quite sure where things are going, but it is a quincunx. It is, I would have said, a fairly minor aspect. So that's it. That's a heliocentric picture. I don't think that there is a great deal else to report about it. So let me now look at the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Friday, April the 18th, 2025. Aries. The moon is changing sign. It's moving from Sagittarius into Capricorn. And also Mars is changing sign. I mean, Mars changing sign, that is certainly a big deal. So, with the moon changing sign, that quite possibly changes your focus. You're starting to think about what you would like to do and what you would like to achieve. And this might be a bit difficult, the fact that it is a Friday. So if you're working, or you're ambitious and you're kind of reliant on people being around, that might put you under a bit of pressure. But just because it's a Friday, just because things are slowing down, doesn't mean that you have to slow down. And with Moon in Capricorn, it stays in Capricorn as you move into the weekend. So keep going. And if there's something you really want to do, you want to achieve, then make sure that you see it through. Just because other people are slacking off doesn't mean that you have to slack off. And matters are made more difficult by the fact that it's Easter, isn't it? I mean, it really is Easter, isn't it? I think I got that right. because I'm sort of isolated from Easter, where I am in the US. I don't see any reference to it, but I think this weekend, it's an Easter weekend. I think that, April the 20th is Easter Sunday. So, with Easter, things could be really slow if you're in Europe or in the UK, but you don't have to slow down. And I don't think you're going to want to slow down because Mars is moving into Leo. And so when Mars moves into Leo, it will, it's not just a big deal because your ruler has changed sign. It also is you've got the fact that Mars is in mutual reception to the Sun. The Sun and Mars are in each other's signs. So that does give you a blast of strength on Friday, Saturday. You really are able to assert yourself. And additionally with Mars and Leo, that's just saying something about the whole way you present yourself. That Mars is out of a water sign and it's in a fire sign. So Aries, in many respects, you're going to be perhaps less emotional than usual, less caught up in your own feelings, and feeling just more familiar with yourself, comfortable in your own skin, perhaps. And this is a time when you can do what you feel you need to do, and you don't have to spend ages and ages analyzing it or worrying about how you feel about it. And additionally, you're perhaps reminded now that Neptune is in Aries. Okay, you've known that Neptune has been in Aries for some time, but now you've got Mars. Now you've got Mars in Leo, and you've got an increasing emphasis on fire signs. You just might feel that everything is right for you. That finally you're being taken seriously, and that is one aspect we've got is. The moon, as it moves into Capricorn, makes a square to Neptune in Aries, and it also makes a square to Mercury in Aries. Now, that might sound like a confusing aspect, but for you, Aries, it may just be a reminder of what it's all about, how things have changed, how these changes are going to work in your favor, because perhaps at some level you really are in tune with the zeitgeist, with the spirit of the world. And so if you feel something is right, and if it's something you want to do, then there's a good chance that you're in accord with the rest of humanity. Taurus, we've got some fairly important things going on. I mean, one important thing is Mars moving out of Cancer and into Leo. And this is an important sign change for everyone. And as far as you're concerned, Mars is moving into quite an important angle of your chart. It's moving into a fixed sign. Taurus is a fixed sign. And so with Mars moving into Leo, you may feel that you want to look after yourself. The concept of protection might be important, and there are certain areas where you could actually be very defensive. What is yours? Where are your interests? Where are your boundaries? How important is your own home? These are the kind of questions that you might be asking yourself as Mars moves into Leo. And the sign Leo, from a Taurean perspective, can be about the home and family. And it may say something about how you get on with other members of your family. Now, it could work in several ways. It may be that you can put a lot of energy into your family, making your home a secure place, and that's one way of seeing it. But you could be over defensive, and when you're dealing with your family, over the next couple of months while Mars is moving through Leo, try to be tolerant and try not to be too stubborn. Remember, Mars is now in a fixed sign. And so with Mars in a fixed sign, you and other members of your family could be very stuck in their ways. But it's important that you have some flexibility, especially if you're sharing the same roof with other people. And Mars moving into Leo, it's not just about you. It may also be about other people, and, for example, partners, spouses, people you have to spend a high proportion of your time with. They could be changing. They could be becoming more definite, and they may be the ones becoming defensive. And so you have to look after other people's interests and understand what's important for them, and do show some tolerance. And don't be surprised if another person is stubborn. They're holding on to what they believe in. So everyone could be stubborn, and that could be a difficult situation if you don't manage it properly. But I don't think there's anything wrong with Mars moving into Leo. It is a time where you can assert yourself, and you can decide, and realize, what is important for you. And at the same time, the moon is moving into Capricorn. Now, moon moving into Capricorn, I think, is something that you should be happy about, because Capricorn is an earth sign, and there's been a lack of earth recently. And you have to rely on the moon moving into an earth sign every now and then. But now it's in an earth sign, and this time round, the drought of Earth, I don't know whether it's appropriate to say a drought of Earth. The drought of Earth is really about to end, and of course you've got Uranus in Taurus, but I don't really count Uranus as being in an Earth sign. Well, it is in an Earth sign, but I don't think it has much of an impact because it is a generational planet. But we've got the Sun about to move into Taurus, and so with the sun moving into Taurus, moving into your sign, the Taurean season is about to start. So you're going to be more nurtured, and you're going to feel more down to earth. And also in Taurus, in some ways, you are one of the more spiritual of the 12 signs. Now, of course, everyone says they're spiritual, don't they? I mean, I don't really claim to be especially spiritual, by the way. I mean, my approach to astrology is possibly not particularly spiritual. I don't regard myself as a super spiritual being, but certainly there are people I'm more spiritual from. There are some people who completely lack spirituality, but Taurus. By the way, I have Taurus rising, so I'm kind of talking about myself a little bit here. But Taurus can be a spiritual sign because they connect, and they're spiritual, especially when it comes to the earth and thinking about the spirituality of the soil and of the diversity of life. And so, with the moon moving into Capricorn, although it seems to be moon in Capricorn quite a selfish placement, I think that for Taurus it's perceived in a rather different way, and it does allow you to tune into your natural environment, especially as the moon is making a square to Neptune, because the moment it moves into Capricorn, it does make that square. And so, there's a possibility that you can get a sense of oneness. And from an environmental view, Mars, of course, is also moving into Leo, and that means it's moving into the fourth house of your chart, and the fourth house can be connected with the earth. So things happening with the earth, with the environment, might upset you. So if you see something being destroyed, trees being cut down, whatever, that might really get to you. And in general, it is a time to appreciate the environment and to understand how important it is, and understand your connection there. And one final point that I should have said is that Mars is making a mutual reception to the Sun. In this reception is going to be active between the time that Mars enters Taurus, between the time Mars enters Leo and Sun moving into Taurus. So there's a couple of days, Friday, Saturday, where that mutual reception is active. And that reception may say something about relationships. You may find that another person is all of a sudden very strong. They suddenly hold all the cards. And so it is a bad time to be taking anyone on at the moment, because you may think you're in a strong position, but you might be. But in a relative sense, you probably aren't. So do respect other people. They might have been weak in the past, but don't think they're going to be weak in the immediate future and in the present. So respect people, and particularly if these people are important to you. And I think that's it, Taurus. I think it is a changeover day, but I think it's a day when, overall, you are becoming stronger and also, I think, more spiritual. But just don't forget that there are people out there with this Sun-Mars mutual reception who really do need to be respected. Gemini, Mars is changing sign. That is going to have an impact on all of us, and some people more than others. From a Gemini perspective, Mars moving into Leo, it's probably going to make life a little bit more interesting. When Mars was moving through Cancer, you could have felt that there were rather tedious things that every now and then had to be dealt with. I mean, they could have had a financial dimension, perhaps. It was all about who owned what. Cancer can be quite a possessive sign, but now that Mars is in Leo, you feel that you have more choices, you have more flexibility, and it might also seem that people are more open to ideas, your ideas. So with Mars moving through Leo, there might be things that you just you want to say, and you feel that now might be the right time. But while that might be true in a general sense, looking at the specifics of today, it's just possible that you can't assert yourself in quite the way you would like to. You've got ideas about making an impact, but despite all your efforts, it just doesn't quite work. And the environment in the short term, perhaps today, maybe into tomorrow a little bit, just may not feel really conducive to action. I mean, you want to make things happen, but as soon as you actually try, then things don't work quite so well. And it could be also that Mercury, your ruler, is still very close to a conjunction of Neptune. So in spite of your best efforts, you may feel a little bit frustrated. And so, Gemini, what should you do about it? Well, one approach, Gemini, might be just to accept that nothing is entirely straightforward, and things might be simple as far as you're concerned, but as far as other people are concerned, they still got their own things that they're trying to work through, and you just have to go with it, and also make a special effort to understand what's happening. And that's something that Geminis don't really want to do. Now, I've said that Mars moving into Leo is going to make things less complicated for you, and that is true. But I'm saying that as a general statement about Mars's passage through Leo, and of course Mars will be in Leo for some time. I think that when does Mars move? I mean, Mars moves out of Leo around the sort of middle of June. So it's going to be a couple of months in that sign. So there's a couple of months for you to take advantage of it, but very, very short term. It might seem that things are still a little complicated, and you perhaps have to use your feelings more than you'd like to. It's like that things have moved on, but you're still feeling stuck, and perhaps you're blaming other people. I mean, that might be a reasonable thing to do. It's not your fault things are stuck. Well, it may be that just things are stuck a little, and there's no point in complaining, and maybe also you should just try to take advantage of the situation in a way that is appropriate. And taking advantage of a situation means trying to understand it as on as many different levels as possible. Using your feelings. Your feelings are still there, and you might feel things that you don't want to feel. You might become aware of things that you're not particularly happy about, but awareness is a good thing. And so once you see the situation, you might get a time perspective on it, and so know that it's not going to last very long. By the end of the weekend, things should be getting better. So Gemini, I'm sorry not to be more positive, but remember, I've got my sun in Gemini, so I'm talking to myself as well as I'm talking to you. Indeed, I might be projecting, but Gemini, I'm afraid it's not one of the best Fridays, but it's only one day, isn't it? Cancer, the Moon is changing sign and Mars is changing sign, and those sign changes are very likely to have an impact on you. So looking at the Moon changing sign, that means Moon moving out of Sagittarius into Cancer, into Capricorn. That might indicate that relationships could start to take center stage, because Capricorn is your opposite sign, and when the Moon moves into Capricorn, it makes a square to Neptune, and it makes a square to Mercury. So those two aspects, well, they could be a little confusing, and it may be difficult to work out exactly what is happening. And maybe you should actually see that square to Neptune as being part of a broader set of squares, because what happens today is the Moon moving from Sagittarius to Capricorn. In late Sagittarius, Moon makes a square to Saturn, and that Moon square Saturn, from a Cancer viewpoint, could be about other people. It could be about relationships, even though the Moon is in Sagittarius, and the difficulties that relationships present, and the frustrations as well. And then when the Moon moves into Capricorn, makes a square to Neptune, and then you realize how confusing other people are. And then also the Moon is making a square to the Saturn-Neptune midpoint. And maybe that's the key point, that the Moon is aspecting Saturn and Neptune at some level, and that's really what the day is about. And so Cancer, there may be uncertainty all day long, and there may be things that concern you. And one reason they might concern you is because you just don't know. You can't make it out. And Cancer, you are normally someone who is very sensitive, and you can understand what's happening, and you have the ability to make a good approximation of the truth. But it might be difficult at the moment, and there may be a lot of conflicting signals. So it might not be clear how you should be acting, and there are going to be plenty of false leads around. So Cancer, it's important that you don't jump to conclusions, and that you accept that you're living in a chaotic world, and it's not personal. It's just the way it is. Now, another thing going on is that we have Mars leaving your sign. Now, Mars has been in Cancer since, I think, beginning of January, isn't that right? And so with Mars moving through Cancer, in one sense, that has made you strong, and it has encouraged you to look after your own interests. But at the same time, it could have been irritating. There were always things to be concerned about, things to worry about, areas where you had to assert yourself. And it could have been a bit exhausting. And so you might take the view that Mars moving out of Cancer is a bit of a relief. It takes the pressure off you. Though there are other things to be concerned about. When Mars moves into Leo, and it stays in Leo for a couple of months, this could be a time when financial matters require attention. At times they could really annoy you. But on a more positive sense, if you struggle hard to look after your own financial interests over the next couple of months, I do think that you can be successful. And on a shorter term level, Mars, when it moves into Leo, is making a mutual reception to the Sun in Aries. So I don't know what you're planning over the next couple of days, Friday, Saturday, but while this mutual reception is in operation, it's very brief. It's a very brief window, this mutual reception. It can be a time where you can actually accomplish a great deal. And I might be talking about career, but it could be your ambitions in general. So if it's something you want, Cancer, then really make sure that you go for it. Now, you might think that that's going to be difficult. Is the weekend? I think it's an Easter weekend, and so for some of you, it might be just hard to get anything together because everything seems to be moving in a different direction. But if you act, on your own, and you do what you feel is important, and you don't worry too much about outside pressure, and you set your own priorities, then actually I think today you can accomplish quite a lot. And finally, relationships. I've already suggested that relationships could be important with the moon moving into Capricorn, but don't make them too important. Yes, you're aware that other people can have an influence on you, and you have to take them into account, but you don't want to make yourself into a martyr. There are other things to be concerned about. There are other things that are important. So I would probably resist the temptation to put too much emphasis on other people and their needs. Leo. So Leo, the big event is Mars moving into your sign. Mars was in Leo the end of last year. I think it actually changed back into Cancer at the beginning of January. And because of this retrograde motion, you may have felt at the end of last year that things were happening, things were starting to move, and then something changed. Could be, in certain cases, that you might have lost some of your dynamism. And right at the end of 2024 and into 2025. But anyway, Mars is now back in your sign, and that does, I think, strengthen you. I mean, Mars is a very energetic planet, and so when you do have Mars in Leo, you probably have more energy at your disposal, and also you could be more assertive, and you're not so prepared to just let things happen without interfering. No, if you don't like something, you're going to be clear about it. So really, it's important that you take advantage of Mars being in Leo, and it is in Leo for the next couple of months. And additionally, Mars, when it moves into Leo, is obviously it's moving into a sign ruled by the Sun, and the Sun is currently in Aries, a sign ruled by Mars. So the Sun and Mars are in mutual reception. Now, this mutual reception between the Sun and Mars is not going to last very long, because the Sun is on the verge of moving into Taurus. So Friday, Saturday might be the time when that mutual reception is active, when you can really take advantage of it. Now, I do know that for many of you, it is Easter weekend. Well, of course, I'm in the United States, so I don't seem to care about Easter, but from a European perspective, I seem to think, Good Friday, Easter Saturday, when they're quite important days. I mean, even if you didn't believe in God, it's certainly had a sort of a cultural significance. I mean, even if it was only getting Easter eggs. So just because it's Easter doesn't mean that you have to just put everything on hold. As you move into the weekend, I think, Leo, there are definitely things that you could be doing, and you shouldn't just assume that you have to follow what everyone else is doing, or rather follow what everyone else is not doing. So, Leo, perhaps you should really seize the moment and decide what really matters to you, and be able to see it through. And in order to accomplish this, it's not perhaps enough just to be dynamic. You also have to have a good sense of order, and what you don't want is just chaos to be building up, preventing you from seeing the wood from the trees. So concentrate on what matters, and some things need to be cleared out of the way. At the very least, you need to clear your viewing port. So the viewing port matters. That's how you see the world. And if it's full of clutter and distractions, well, how are you going to get anything done? So it's important to be organized, and also to be inspired, because you don't really normally associate organization with inspiration, but the two can really walk hand in hand today, and indeed as you enter the weekend. So, Leo, you are actually pretty inspired at the moment. You can have some great ideas, and these ideas might spur you into action. Now, acting on an idea might be very similar to acting on impulse. I'm not advocating for you to just do the first thing that comes into your head, but also delay is not your friend. If you just delay something because you can't get it together, then it's quite possible that you miss your moment. So you've got to be very aware and very alert today and over the weekend. Not because you have to, not because any danger is going to come your way, but because you just want to just be able to make the most of everything in front of you. And, don't underestimate your strength, and don't imagine that someone else or a particular situation is stronger than it actually is. You are the person in control, and in many respects, today and tomorrow, Leo is, of all the 12 signs, is the strongest. So that gives you a special responsibility, and it's very important that you don't waste this opportunity. Now, as far as relationships are concerned, Well, you do have to put the emphasis on yourself. So if you are having to deal with other people, you want to spend time with other people, it does have to be on your terms. And if there's a disagreement, there is an argument for saying, well, you should hold firm, hold to what you believe in. I think in the end, the other person will back down, or will accept that your way is the right way. So overall, Leo, it's a dynamic Friday. So it's not a time to just be retreating into your cave. Now that's not the right thing to do. Well, unless your cave is somewhere very special, somewhere where you can really work on exciting and interesting and dynamic projects. But retreat for the sake of retreat probably is something that should be avoided. Virgo, we have the moon moving into Capricorn, and I would regard the moon moving into Capricorn as a good thing for you, because when the moon is in Capricorn, you have a greater sense of yourself, and also you may start to lose some of your caution. I think recently, certainly over the last couple of days, you have been a little bit cautious. You weren't absolutely sure, what was going on, and at times it might have been difficult to trust. So under those circumstances, it just might have been better just to stick to what you know. But with the moon moving into Capricorn, you do have more freedom, and you also have the freedom to enjoy yourself in ways which are suitable for you. And it's not a situation where you have to worry too much about outside opinions. And so Friday moving into the weekend, it can be and should be your weekend, a weekend where you can make things happen in your own way, and you also have to avoid things which are going to hold you back. So it could be, for example, that not everyone is constructive. You expect help, you don't get help. And if you are reliant on another person, then things could go wrong. And so what you don't want to do, Virgo, is get yourself into a situation where you feel frustrated. And that means possibly that you shouldn't be too patient. So although it is a day of high creativity, there are going to be lots of different things you could be doing. Maybe lots of different people you could be associating with, but not all of it is going to work. And there might be times when you're doing something and you just feel you're getting nowhere. And the moment you feel you're getting nowhere with something, just move on and just keep moving on and try something else. If that works, then stick with it. And it might be a situation where success breeds success. And by contrast, frustration breeds frustration. So if something starts off not working, then it will probably not work at all. So that means, Virgo, it's probably a bad idea to be too patient. Though don't forget that Mercury is now in Aries, and it's conjunct Neptune in Aries. So that actually gives you a certain amount of dynamism. I think I talked about this yesterday. There is an Aries emphasis now, and I know you're not an Aries, but at the moment you have some of the attributes of an Aries. And yeah, one attribute of Aries is impatience. And it's just not putting up with anything for longer than you have to do. And so if you remember that, then I think that today should be fine. Libra, we have Mars changing sign. And this sign change could be important because, if you think about it, Mars does rule Aries, your opposite sign. So that might say something about other people and how they change and their general attitude. And so with Mars moving into Aries, it might be the case that you feel that other people are being more assertive than usual. I mean, that is absolutely possible. And people have very strong ideas about what they would like to happen. And so that's going to be important if you're having a busy social life. If you want to spend Friday and a weekend being, with other people, then you might find that you're not in full control. Because it's not just that Mars is moving into Leo, it's also the fact that Mars is in mutual reception with the Sun. So Mars is in Leo, which is of course a sign ruled by the Sun, and the Sun is in Aries, a sign ruled by Mars. So that Sun mutual reception with Mars, which takes place, Friday, Saturday, it could make other people, very strong and difficult to resist and difficult to contradict. So think carefully about that. And if you do have a sort of a heavily sociable day, you might not have much control. But on the plus side, if you need support and you need to have strong people around you in order to accomplish something, then I think those people will be available. And if you ask for help from the right person, then you might be kind of surprised with what you get and with how much support comes your way. And additionally, Mars moving into Leo, it stays in Leo for a couple of months, and so with Mars in Leo, it's going to be a couple of months where perhaps other people can't be avoided, and your social life could get a fair amount of emphasis. And so think about your friends and what people you'd like to have as friends, and so be ready to be quite interactive and think about how people can make your life better. So that might be a way of approaching Mars in Leo. But that's a kind of quite a long-term thing. As far as the specifics of today is concerned, yes, there is a temptation to be sociable, but as I've just said, you have to be careful. If you're too sociable, you might be giving something away in terms of your own freedom. Additionally, we've got the moon moving into Capricorn, and moon moves through Capricorn, today and into the weekend. And while it's moving through Capricorn, it makes a square to Neptune, and because of that moon square Neptune, it may actually be that your best option is to actually keep a fairly low profile. Yeah, there might be pressure to do things, but is it going to make you happy? Is it going to make you feel good about yourself? I don't really think so. And as it's an Easter weekend, Easter weekend isn't that a time to be spending time at home with your family? That might be a good way of approaching things. So don't feel that you have to do anything this weekend, and indeed today, which is Friday for many of us, is going to be the beginning of a weekend. Don't feel that there's any real obligation. Scorpio. So Scorpio, it's happening. Mars is changing sign out of Cancer and into Leo, and Mars stays in Leo for a couple of months, I think until the middle of June. So with this sign change, it could make you feel pretty ambitious. Is a focus on your ambitions. And so while Mars has been moving through Cancer since the beginning of January, Scorpio, it might have been a time when you have been picking up information, also kind of working out what your actual stance is, because it is a time, isn't it, of pressure in terms of what we believe in. It's very difficult to know what to believe in, and at the same time, everyone is just trying to find something something they want to get obsessed about, and that's not healthy. And hopefully Scorpio, you've just done a bit of shopping, maybe ideological shopping. You've been shopping for different ideas, and you've worked out what works, what doesn't work, and the shopping spree has finished. And hopefully by now you have a good sense of what you believe in and what you want to do next. And now with Mars moving into Leo, you could say that it's time to actually put theory into practice. And that's what you should be doing over the next couple of months. And it is a time when you can really push forward with your ambitions. So if there's anything you want to achieve, of whatever nature, then now really is the time to be getting going on it. Now, on a more short-term level, Mars is in mutual reception with the Sun. The Sun is in Aries and Mars is in Leo. They're in each other's signs. But the trouble is, this mutual reception does not last forever. In fact, it's very brief. So, to be precise, and I hope I'm not confusing things too much here, but to give you an idea of how long this mutual reception lasts for, so Mars moves into Leo today at 5:21 GMT, 5:21 London time, and that's when the mutual reception starts. So the mutual receptions will have started sort of last night, on late Thursday if you're in the Americas. So it starts early in the morning if you're in Europe, which would be in the afternoon if you're in Australasia. And then it continues through until the Sun moves into Taurus. And the Sun moves into Taurus on Saturday at around 9 o'clock in the evening, London time, which would be 9 o'clock in the evening in the afternoon in the Americas. So that is the window. So you can see that it's a very brief window. And so do make make the most of it. And so that could be, if you're in the Americas or Europe, it's really Friday is the day when you can really excel, when your dynamism is at a maximum. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, it's going to be more Saturday. But so those are the 2 days that you should be concentrating on. So don't slack off, just because it's a weekend. You've got things to do, Scorpio. And it's not necessarily about getting other people's help. Other people may be helpful, they may not be helpful, they may be doing something else, but it shouldn't matter. So Scorpio, try to be as independent-minded and self-reliant as possible today, and the same goes for tomorrow. And also Scorpio, we have the moon moving into Capricorn, and you may pick up on this particularly powerfully, this moon moving into Capricorn, because when the moon moves into Capricorn, it can be a time when some of us are a little bit selfish and materialistic. And really, Scorpio, at the moment, I think it's okay to be selfish. It might actually be quite a good thing to be selfish and concentrate on what is important to you, and don't be distracted. The moon does make a square to Neptune and a square to Mercury, and it's possible that small details might get in your way and might weaken you, and you might sort of deviate from your course. But I do think that is unnecessary. So that's pretty much it. I'm not going to say anything about relationships that I haven't already said. Perhaps on a previous day. Yeah, Venus is moving towards a conjunction of Saturn. That may say something about, well, the people around you, the people close to you. They might be more serious than usual. They might be more focused than usual, which would be a good thing. But that's up to them. The key thing is that you do things your way, and if you can do that, then I think that the sky's the limit. Sagittarius, we do have some sign changes today, and Mars is changing sign. Mars is moving out of Cancer into Leo. So Mars is moving into a fire sign, and from a Sagittarian viewpoint, this is something which, to my mind, looks pretty good. So, you are a fire sign, so when you've got Mars moving into Leo, you feel an extra spark, and you feel that, there are things you can do. And, when Mars moves into Leo, it starts to make a trine to Neptune. Also, Mars is making a trine to Mercury. I mean, that trine between Mars and Mercury is not exact. It's actually already separating. But the thing is, you've got Mars trine Neptune, Mars trine Mercury, those two planets in Mercury and Neptune in Aries, Mars in Leo, and so it's having a trine relationship to Sagittarius, which is obviously your own sign. So that means that today, Sagittarius, I do really think that things can move, and you can make things happen, and there is a certain excitement in the air, but it's not just excitement for the sake of it. It can be concentrated on things that you would like to achieve in the real world, because the moon is leaving your sign. It's moving into Capricorn. So what that means is moon in Sagittarius was perhaps about your creative impulse, and then moon moves into Capricorn. You're thinking, well, actually, how are you going to stabilize it? How are you going to make something more permanent? And how are you going to look after yourself on a material level? So the moon in Capricorn does give you a certain amount of self-interest, but not an overwhelming self-interest. There is the overall air of excitement, but you're not really forgetting about yourself, and so that seems to be the right balance. Now, one thing, Sagittarius, is don't allow yourself to be distracted by things which seem a little bit disturbing. You might become aware of something that you'd rather not be aware of, or someone might say something that just is a bit weird, even a bit creepy maybe. But it's easy to jump to conclusions, but I think you need to take it in your stride, and this just might be just a sign of what you're living in, and it's probably nothing personal, and there's certainly no need to panic, and you just need to just see the world as it is, and the world isn't always great, and the world can be disturbing, but that shouldn't take away from what can be a very exciting day. Capricorn, things are, I think, looking quite good, not least because the moon is moving into your sign. Now, when the moon moves into your sign, kind of depends where you are. If you're in the Americas, then this morning the moon moves into Capricorn. If you're in Europe or Africa, it's this afternoon, perhaps even late this afternoon. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, well, I'm afraid the moon isn't going to move into Capricorn until tomorrow, but that's something to look forward to. But, with the moon moving into Capricorn, you're feeling perhaps better. You feel better, and you feel that it's just easier to be yourself and to express yourself. Over the last couple of days, you've had a little bit of uncertainty. I mean, you were, I think, well placed, but you weren't absolutely sure of yourself. But with Moon in Capricorn, you feel that there is a higher level of certainty, and it's easier to look after your own interests and to consider what matters to you. And it's important, though, that you're not entirely distracted, because the moon in Capricorn is very materialistic. It's very serious. It's very sensible. But the moon is making a square to Neptune, and with that moon square Neptune, that might say something about your home or your family, or something that is fundamental to you that you might all of a sudden feel a little bit uncertain about. And I would suggest that you don't worry too much about that. It's a situation where something has to be said. You say something to members of your family, or something relating to your own home. You initiate a conversation, and through that conversation, it does seem that something can be resolved. And as far as your ability to get on with other people, and this also relates to partnerships, things continue to look good. Venus is getting closer and closer to Saturn. It's slow because Venus is moving slowly, but Venus, a planet of relationships, is within 1.5 degrees or so of Saturn. So that just does give you a natural facility with other people and a natural ability to communicate and to be able to say the right things. And that's helped by the fact that the moon is now in Capricorn, and so you can really start to initiate things. And to an extent, I think that people are going to be looking to you for guidance. And with the moon moving into Capricorn, some people may actually be quite reliant on you. So be aware of that reliance, and because if someone is reliant on you, that does give you a degree of responsibility. Aquarius, Mars is moving into Leo. In other words, Mars is moving into your opposite sign. And Mars stays in Leo for 2 months, approximately, till the middle of June. So that might say something about relationships. It might. How can you validate it? So perhaps what I'd like you to do, if you can, is to think back to the end of last year. So remember the presidential election. That was when Mars went into Leo, and it stayed in Leo until January the 6th, and then it went retrograde. So try to think about what was going on November and December, and how you related to other people. Now, it's absolutely possible that you think back, nothing happened. It wasn't a big deal. In that case, you might say, Mars moving into Leo, likewise, is not going to be such an important event. Though, sometimes with astrology, when something happens the first time, nothing works, doesn't seem to be of any significance. And when it happens the second time, that's when you get the fireworks. Or it can work the other way around. So just because when Mars was moving into Leo at the end of last year, there were events relating to other people, doesn't mean to say it's going to happen again. And alternatively, Aquarius, it might be that you're dealing with a situation a social situation that you have become used to. You become familiar with it, and you perhaps have a better understanding of how other people work and the kind of pressures that they can bring to bear. So, if we were to look at Mars moving into Leo in the worst possible light, then we would say this is a time of argument, of conflict, and also irritation. And you don't want to have to deal with other people. Mars in Leo, but you kind of have to. And of course, what happens is at the moment Mars moves into Leo, it starts to make an opposition to Pluto. Pluto is of course in Aquarius, across the main axis of your solar chart. So your solar chart, if you are looking at it from the viewpoint of the sun, you may be looking at it from the viewpoint of your ascendant or your moon. So the main axis of your chart. So that Mars-Pluto opposition, it is about power, and no doubt about that, and who has the power. And with Pluto now in Aquarius, you're very into the concept of power. You have a good feeling for it. Who's in control? Who's not in control? And ideally, you want to be the one who's able to make things happen. But with Mars moving into Leo, there could be something of a challenge, and that challenge is possibly going to be more intense if your ascendant or your sun or your moon is right at the beginning of Aquarius. So that is that's not something you should dismiss easily. This Mars moving into Leo. And as far as the specifics of today and tomorrow with the moon moving into Capricorn, well, with the moon moving into Capricorn, that might be telling you something about how to deal with the situation. It's not a time where you need to deal with anything directly. Not at the moment. And with moon moving through Capricorn, you might feel that it's better just to wait it out. Okay, not wait out the whole 2 months, because Capricorn is not going to be in, moon is not going to be in Capricorn for 2 months. But over the next couple of days, you may feel like waiting it out and just seeing how things develop. And direct confrontation should probably be avoided, because I don't think you'll be in a sufficiently strong position. It's best to just wait it out. On the other hand, not every social contact is about conflict. If you look at the chart, you can see that Saturn, which is your ruler, Saturn rules Aquarius. It's not Neptune. Sorry, it's not Uranus. Uranus. There's an association between Uranus and Aquarius, but Saturn is the traditional ruler of Aquarius. So Saturn is conjunct the North Node and it's conjunct Venus. It's right in between the two. So you could say, well, Saturn is on the Venus North Node midpoint, and so with that combination, that is actually quite useful as far as being with other people, but not other people in a sort of one-to-one conflict situation. It's you against them. You don't want to get that deep. You just want to have a general association with people. And if you can have general associations with other people today and into tomorrow, then I think you can actually forge some very useful connections. Pisces. I've been saying rather a lot about Mars moving into Leo, and you might be wondering, what that means for you. I don't think it actually means a great deal for you. I don't think it's something that you need to worry about. I mean, that's doesn't mean to say that you will feel nothing from Mars moving into Leo. So you've had Mars moving through Cancer for a long time. I mean, since the beginning of January, and so since the beginning of January, I'm hoping that with that Mars in Cancer, you've been able to get a greater awareness of who you are and what you can do and what you can do well, and also what you enjoy. I mean, I'm hoping that's how it worked for you. I'm not saying it did work for you like that, but that would certainly be the ideal. And so with Mars moving into Leo, there might be a certain realization on your part that in terms of where you put your energy, you need to put your energy into securing things, making sure that all your ideas and your ideas about yourself are actually real and are manageable and can actually become part of the future. So that might be one way in which Mars in Leo is working. There could be a health dimension to Mars moving through Leo. And, I'm just saying this because it's a possibility. And I'm sure it's nothing that you have to worry about. But, while Mars is moving through Leo, and that happens over the next couple of months, a lot of your energy could go into your health. Health may be something that is important to you and something you want to put a lot of effort into. You don't want to put too much effort into it. And Mars moving through Leo may indicate that you don't want to get too angry, and I'm thinking about that in an almost sort of medieval sense. You have the four humors, and if the humors get out of control, then there's too much anger, then that can you become, what's the word, if you become too choleric, to use a medieval word. And I think that was sort of important in the sort of Elizabethan times. And there were plays about, there was a play, I can't remember who wrote it, but about Tamburlaine, this conquering Asian king, emperor. Was he an emperor? And he was Amir, wasn't he? He was an Amir, and he conquered a great chunk of Asia, and he was just so angry. His anger sort of ate him up, because that was an excess of the choleric humor. And so Pisces, with Mars moving through Leo, you don't want to get too angry about anything. And if something makes you angry, then that's going to undermine your health, or at least it could undermine your health. So anger needs to be something that is really avoided. I mean, there is always a place for anger, but if you're getting angry about something you can't do anything about, Pisces, then really that is not going to help. Another manifestation of Mars in Leo might be, depends on your situation, that you want to put a lot of energy into helping animals, small animals. Not large ones. I'm not talking about horses or whales. I'm talking things that are smaller than a goat, which for most of us is probably going to be dogs and cats, but it could be animals, wild animals, rabbits, coyotes, foxes, whatever is relevant to you. And so some Pisceans might want to put a lot of energy into that. And even if you're not putting energy into that, it might be something to consider. So if you are of a charitable disposition and you've got time on your hands and you feel you need to do something that is going to help you and sort of make you feel calmer, then don't ignore the animal world, because there may be some action there. And of course it might have something to do with your pets and how you relate to your pets. So you've heard what I've said, so but you have to kind of work that out to fit your particular set of circumstances. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now it's time to consider things from the point of view of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Friday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 5, which is waiting. So we get the idea of waiting for something. And, what are we waiting for? And at some stage, we're going to have to take action, because waiting cannot be a permanent state of affairs. At some stage, something absolutely has to happen. And, an alternative view of this hexagram is that it's about actually taking the initiative. It's a time when we have to go into the river. When we go into the river, we're going to get wet, and that can't be avoided, because if you want to forge the river, there is a cost. If there's no bridge, okay, it'd be great if you could just walk across a bridge. But rivers in I Ching are very often things that you have to swim across or wade across. They're not things that can be nicely crossed with a bridge. And the question is, in what state are we waiting? And this hexagram has 3 moving lines, and has a second line moving, a third line moving, the 6th and final line moving. So with the second line, it says waiting in sand. Now that sounds a strange thing, waiting in sand. What does that mean? Well, one approach to that is saying if we're waiting in sand, it means, well, there's sand, which means we're close to the water. Maybe like we're on the beach, and we're getting ready to have to think about making that crossing. And so we can't put it off forever. Another approach is to say, well, sand is a situation where sand is getting everywhere, and it's kind of annoying. And the sand might represent gossip, people saying bad things about us. And, we hear this, and it kind of upsets us, and we're not quite sure whether we should actually take the initiative. And the I Ching basically says that we shouldn't worry too much about it. There are these irritations. The sand is annoying, but it's not enough to stop us in our tracks. So we might then feel that, the time for waiting is over, regardless of the gossip, regardless of a slightly negative atmosphere. We do feel that we have to make the next move. And so that means we move to the third line. Now that's not waiting in sand, it's waiting in mud. Now that's not so good. We are stuck, and that might be because we didn't wait long enough. And so we took the initiative, or maybe we've gone a bit too far, and we just feel rather stuck. So there may come a point in the day when it just feels that nothing is happening, when we are completely stuck. And it may feel also that things are actually getting worse when we actually move into the 6th line, because by the 6th line, we're waiting in a pit. Now, that doesn't sound good. But then the I Ching talks about 3 uninvited guests. Now, literally, there might be 3 uninvited guests. Sometimes one should just take the I Ching at its word. Alternatively, that might be about getting help. And, just at the moment where you think things are getting bad, but you can't make any progress, help is available. And so just because we feel stuck in a pit doesn't mean we have to stay in the pit, because people, we may not have trusted them at first, but they've actually got something to offer. So don't get despondent today if it really feels as if nothing is happening, as if you feel completely stuck. And yeah, there might be unexpected help available. It might come from real people. I mean, it could be 3 uninvited guests. It could just be your own resources and you being able to bring in new resources to find a way to get out of a pit. And when you're out of a pit, you can move to a second hexagram. And the second hexagram that it moves to is something we've had quite recently, and that is hexagram 42, which is increase. So it may be a case today of, all's well that ends well, that in the end, things will improve. You're going to make progress. The end of the day compared to the beginning of the day, you're going to have more. Now, increase could be financial increase, but it just could be just feeling better about yourself, feeling more worthy, and also increase. There are more opportunities, and it may be that you can actually start to count your blessings. You can see what you've got, and you've actually got quite a lot. And also, if you've been able to make that transition, at the time of waiting ended, you progressed. It wasn't easy. At one stage, you actually fell into a pit, but you did make that transition, and now things are starting to work. So in the end, it should be a good Friday, but at times over the course of the day, it might not feel that way. So let's now look at the astrology. There are 2 things I want to look at. I firstly wanted to have another look at the UK Supreme Court judgment, basically saying that, as far as I understand it, that women should be defined by biology rather than through any sort of piece of paper, a certificate of gender. And so here is, let's look at this chart. I think the judgment was started to be made at around 9:53 a.m. on Wednesday. So if I've got that wrong, my apologies. It was certainly Wednesday morning, and then, over the next minutes, and I don't know, the next 10 minutes or so, apparently it's quite a brief and succinct judgment. So here it is. So here is a judgment. So reminder, this is the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is not like the Supreme Court in the US, but it is the highest court. And I'm not a great legal expert, but it judges on how law should be interpreted. I think it was looking at how a particular act, I think it was the 2004 Act, how it should be interpreted. And the Supreme Court said that, basically said that, the definition of a woman is biological, and this has implications for, places like, changing rooms and other sort of associations, which are sort of women only, and what is a woman. So it was quite an important judgment, and it's certainly huge news in the UK, and it possibly has implications, around the world, if that's what the UK has decided. Now, the Supreme Court, unlike the Supreme Court in the US, it's as far as I can see, it's a pretty progressive organisation. There's nothing conservative about the Supreme Court in the UK, and indeed for other cases, for example, relating to sort of Brexit, people on the right in the UK were very suspicious of the Supreme Court, but clearly the Supreme Court is sort of not always going to be supporting hyper progressive causes, like trans rights. Here they've clearly said what a woman is. And so this is a chart for when that judgment was starting to be made. Now, I did talk about it yesterday, and one point I made was that Venus was conjunct Saturn. Now, Venus is conjunct Saturn for the rest of the month, and So, what does it mean for the Venus to be conjunct Saturn? And, I had been quite negative about Venus conjunct Saturn, saying that, Venus is under pressure. Although Venus is in Pisces, which is it's exalted in Pisces, it's going direct. And so you might say that, what this ruling does is it regulates the definition of a woman, and it judges on it, and it pronounces on it. It removes uncertainty. And so you might say that is Saturn at its best. And Saturn is about judges, and it's about authority figures. And this conjunction, it's not just Venus was conjunct Saturn. Venus was also conjunct the North Node. So even though Saturn is between Venus and the North Node could be about what is right. And so Venus is conjunct the North Node, Saturn is conjunct the North Node. And if you were to use, if you were using Placidus houses, this Venus-Saturn North Node is in the 10th house. And the 10th house kind of has an association with authority and judgment, but from a whole sign view, it would be in the 9th house. And of course, in traditional astrology, the 9th house represents represents higher courts. So third house is the magistrates' courts, lower level courts. 9th house is higher courts, and the Supreme Court is the highest court in the UK. And it's not just England; it is UK, because this was a ruling originally about Scotland, about the policies that the Scottish government was putting forth. So the Supreme Court covers everything, all the constituents of the United Kingdom. And so, it's perhaps fitting that it's in the whole sign 9th house. And Britain has its moon, England has its moon at around 29, 29 Pisces. And so, Mars was kind of trine England's moon. So England's moon at the time of the crowning of sort of William the Conqueror, Christmas Day 1066. I know this says it December the 31st, but that's just because it's switched Julian to Gregorian. It is, but December the 25th, 24th. So England's moon is at 29/4 Pisces, if William the Conqueror really was crowned at noon. And so going back to the Supreme Court judgment, Mars is at 29/16 Cancer. So Mars was actually very close to being making a trine to the moon. And Venus is not the only planet in a chart that you can associate with women. I think that the moon is a female planet. So Mars trine the moon, that might say something about the judgment. But from a collective view, Neptune is now in Aries, and Mercury is making a close conjunction to Neptune. And there are a number of ways of seeing this Mercury conjunct Neptune. And you might see it as being about just chaos, mental confusion, that kind of way, or spirituality and psychic powers. But you might see it in a different way. Neptune moving into Aries. In other words, it's moving out of Pisces, and that is the key point. Neptune is no longer in Pisces. And Mercury is the communicator. It's communicating what it means for Neptune to now be in Aries. And remember, Aries, it's not just about Aries, it's a kind of the anti-Pisces, because Neptune has moved into Pisces, has moved out of Pisces. And when I looked at Neptune moving into Aries, I did make the suggestion that this might bring to an end certain aspects of wokeness, certainly excessive wokeness. And while Neptune has been in Pisces, you've had this sort of explosion in trans news and Pisces is a very confusing influence, and so boundaries have been broken down. What is a woman? Is a woman a piece of paper? Things like gender have become so abstract, and this has really had a big influence on Western society. And so you could say that Neptune moving through Pisces was really peak woke, and it could be that the power of the trans lobby was at its peak while Neptune was in Pisces. And this judgment with Mercury conjunct Neptune in Aries is the first sign that actually things have changed. Now that Neptune is in Aries, things are more direct, things are more clear. All of that, a lot of the diversity and wokeness is going to we're going to move on from that. Okay, Neptune does actually move back into Pisces briefly, so we're not fully over it, and Saturn is still in Pisces. And additionally, we've got Saturn conjunct the North Node in Pisces, and so Saturn is saying, well, no, we've gone too far here. And so I think that we might see this Supreme Court ruling as the beginning of something, as the unwinding of a lot of the wokeness that has been building up while Neptune has been in Pisces. Now, that was not the intention of the Supreme Court judges, but the Supreme Court judge, and it was a unanimous judgment, but there's just reflecting perhaps something that is going on in the collective. So now I just want to quickly look at Mars in Leo. This is a big change, and I want to look at a few examples of people with Mars in Leo. And so here's a chart of Mars in Leo when Mars goes into Leo. So I make it that Mars goes into Leo at 5:21 London time on today, which is Friday. Of course, I'm making this video on a Thursday, but it is for Friday, and so that means that last night, late Thursday, if you're in California, Mars would have gone into Leo, and over the course of the day, wherever you are, Mars will make that sign change. And so what does it mean for Mars to be in Leo? I mean, as I've mentioned earlier in this video, I think that short term Mars is going to be in mutual reception with the Sun for a very brief window. And so I must emphasize, if there's something you really want to do, then having those two very dynamic masculine planets in mutual reception may make it really easier for you to get results. So that is, that's one way of looking at Mars in Leo. And then as Mars goes through Leo, it is a more exciting and dynamic time. It's nice that Mars is moving into a positive sign, and this sort of adds to the positivity. We've had Neptune moving into Aries, which is a positive sign because it's air. We've got air and fire are the positive signs, and we've got Pluto already in Aquarius. We've got Saturn at some stage will move into Aries. So things are becoming more positive, and I think that Mars moving into Leo is going to boost that positivity. And Mars in Leo is very proud, and this is perhaps what Mars is about. Mars in Leo is about. We have to look after ourselves, and it is quite a masculine thing, Mars moving into Leo. When one of the reasons I thought that one of the many reasons I thought was that Trump was going to win is because just at the beginning of November of last year was just as Mars moved from Cancer into Leo. That was when Trump was in the presidential election. So that boosted, I think, male candidates. Although, of course, just before Mars moves into Leo, we had this judgment, which is a big victory for women, and women being told that that gender, or at least the definition of a woman, has a biological basis. But that was before Mars went into Leo. So as far as what Mars in Leo means in the natal chart, I thought I would just look at a few examples of Mars in Leo. So Mars in Leo can be very proud, and it can be excessively proud, and it can take risks. So a person who took a lot of risks, who had Mars in Leo, was Alexander Litvinenko. So he was the man who was killed by the Russians. He was in England and he was killed with polonium, which was a sort of radioactive element, and he died a pretty horrible death. But he wanted to be a center of attention. If you are a member of a Russian security services and you effectively defect to the West, you have to be very, very careful, because there's a good chance you're going to be killed. It does happen. But Mars in Leo, he kind of couldn't help himself, and he was too public in the way he was presenting himself, and he had sort of meetings in London with Russians to do, I think, was it business deals or whatever, and that was when, of course, he was given this tea which had the polonium in it. So Mars in Leo can be too much about one's own ego and not actually accepting the delicacy of the situation one might be in. And you could say the same for another Russian dissident who died in prison, and that was Alexander Navalny, who had Mars in Leo. And so he had planets in Gemini, Sun and Venus in Gemini, but he also had Mars in Leo, and he was a larger-than-life person who I think wanted to be the center of attention. He got involved in politics, and he had this video where he was talking about Putin's big mansion. I think that really annoyed Putin in quite a big way. And when he had that nerve gas attack on a plane, he went to Germany for treatment, and having been treated, he went back into Russia. Was that Sun in Gemini being in denial, feeling he just had to say what was on his mind? Or was it Mars in Leo having a high opinion of himself, feeling he could get away with it? Or was it an act of just plain martyrdom and self-sacrifice? And he had Mars square the North Node. So that was an important part of his destiny, perhaps, believing in himself so much that but he went back to Russia. So these are people who are not in the news at the moment. Someone who is in the news, who has Mars in Leo, is Benjamin Netanyahu. So with Benjamin Netanyahu, I would have thought that he seems to demonstrate Mars in Leo pretty well. I mean, Benjamin Netanyahu is a man who has a high opinion of himself, who wants to be in control. And when you've got Mars in Leo, Mars in a positive sign, and it's above the horizon, because we don't know exactly when he was born, but he was born sometime in the morning, so Mars would have been above the horizon. So it's quite a strong Mars. It's perhaps an overly strong Mars, and it's sextile the Sun in Libra. So he wants to be domineering. He wants to be in control. So I would have said that Mars in Leo is quite descriptive of Benjamin Netanyahu. And in terms of British politics, there is Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister. I don't think I need to show. Okay, here's her chart. So Angela Rayner, she has got Mars in Leo. Might be working in a slightly different way because she's a woman, and so this Mars might be projecting. But she's got Sun in Aries, so it's kind of quite difficult because she's got Sun in Aries. and Mars in Leo, it might be difficult to know what one is seeing. Is one seeing Sun in Aries, or is one seeing Mars in Leo, or is one seeing both? I mean, she clearly is someone who likes to express her opinion. She's got Mars conjunct the North Node. She makes a lot of noise, and so she seems to be living that Mars in Leo out. Now, Mars in Leo can be quite destructive. I mean, it might encourage one to do bad things if one really believes that one is right. So, for example, the Chilean dictator Augusto Pinochet had Mars in Leo, and so Mars in Leo, I think he had Sun in Sagittarius and Mars in Leo. I think I've got his charts. Yeah, here we are. Here's Pinochet's chart. So Pinochet was the Chilean dictator. He seized power on a coup on September the 11th, 1973. A lot of human rights abuses there, and so there is Pinochet's chart, and there's his Mars in Leo, and so Mars in Leo. You could say that the signs Leo represents kingship, someone who believes that they have king-like qualities, hence the idea of a dictator. So that could be a way in which one might see Mars in Leo, and we can't avoid the fact that Donald Trump has Mars in Leo, and I think that Mars in Leo in Trump's chart is pretty strong. Again, whatever you think of Donald Trump, clearly he wants to be in control, and he has been accused of being a dictator or having dictatorial ambitions regarding himself as a king. I'm not saying whether those accusations are right or wrong, but he has Mars rising. He has Leo rising. I think it's likely he has Leo rising, even though it's 2958 right on the cusp. So there's his Mars. It is indeed a really strong Mars. So politicians who have Mars in Leo, might be encouraged to, maybe sort of stay where they are, and they enjoy the power that their office brings them. And another politician with Mars in Leo is Emmanuel Macron. He seems to personify Mars in Leo. He regards himself as Jupiter. He's got Sun in Sagittarius, and there's his Mars at 11 Leo. And maybe we don't have to worry too much about looking at the aspects to that Mars in Leo, but though that Mars in Leo is making a square to Uranus and a square to the moon, so he's not afraid of causing real tumult and chaos in order to stay in power, to be as powerful as possible. So again, politicians with Mars and Leo, we do have to watch them. And then we've got Vladimir Zelensky. He has Mars in Leo. He's got Mars at 0 degrees 15 Leo, and he's just not going away, is he? I mean, he's passed his presidential term. He hasn't called elections, and you would have thought, given the pressure he's under, and don't forget, if anyone wants to get rid of him, it's not the Russians. It's going to be local. It's going to be local political rivals. I think from a Russian perspective, I think from a Russian perspective, Zelensky is quite possibly an asset. Particularly in terms of the headstrong way he's dealt with that other president with Mars and Leo, which is of course Donald Trump. But Zelensky does have his Mars return at the moment, and I mean he seems to have survived everything. So you would have thought, well, Mars return, maybe he'll just get through that, and he'll just be even more Mars in Leo. But he really is incredibly stubborn. He's got a very fixed chart, and that Mars in Leo he's just very focused, and he stays in power, and so he has ideas about himself and what he can do. Might seem to be a little bit arrogant, but then he's a politician with Mars and Leo. What else do you expect? And I could look at more Mars and Leo charts, but I think I'll call it a day. So thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description. And I will talk to you again tomorrow.